Hello and welcome back to our final session of today's Training Industry Leader Talk. I am proud of each and every one of you who has joined 5 sessions. If it was 432, that was me as well. So you are not alone there, but I am proud of you guys for joining the session. It is great talking about effective coaching and feedback, sponsored by ELB Learning, Biz Library, Ariel Group, Leadership Progress Cycle, and Blue Point Leadership. So again, I am Liz Spate, the Events Marketing Specialist here at Training Industry, and I'm thrilled to have you with us. So before we get started, I'd like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with the speaker and get the most out of today's program. So for this session, please use that chat window to comment any chats and all that good stuff and submit those questions in the Q&A panel. We will be addressing all questions at the end during the Q&A section. But don't hesitate, please plug those questions away throughout. And at the end of your time here with us, you will notice a short evaluation survey has popped open in another tab in your browser. We would appreciate your thoughts on today's event. And all of our sessions are being recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com, and you'll receive a follow-up email from us with the link to the on-demand session. If this is your first training industry event, we would love to welcome you. We exist to make connections among learning and development professionals. We offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D, like live events like today's Leader Talk, as well as through articles on our website, our magazine, conferences, research reports, and our podcast. We would also love to hear about what you've learned from today's session on social media, so please follow us on your favorite platforms for us to continue that conversation. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our speakers. Jay Harris is an accomplished facilitator and executive coach based in Atlanta, Georgia, with expertise in areas of leadership development, education, personal and company brand development, and extensive training in DEIB leadership and organizational allyship. Jay's passion and focus is helping executives, entrepreneurs, and affiliates achieve exceptional results using his knowledge of leadership efficiencies in continuous changing times, strategic thinking, and leveraging authenticity in the workplace. Bernice Ang helps senior leaders craft their executive brand and presence. She uses a broad set of proven effective tools to help clients reframe their mindset, master communication skills, build strong networking, and lead others through effective change. We are so excited to have you guys, and the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello. Awesome. Thank you so much, Liz, and welcome in everyone. I see we have some people from, I see Raleigh, North Carolina. I've seen Maryland, Canada, Minnesota, and I see there's a neighbor, a Georgia neighbor in the group as well, Kansas City, Texas, Florida. We're excited to be with you guys and really appreciate you for hanging around for the last session of the day with Bernice and I. I want to share with you that our session, we're considering this a fireside chat, that we want to bring you along for the conversation. So, we invite you and encourage you to listen and engage with us around this topic of effective leadership. Now, a lot of times when we hear, effective leadership, and when we're talking about different ways to, grow and improve our leadership, we hear a lot about communication and soft skills, which are very important. However, Bernice and I would like to add to that by introducing a lens or sharing our lens of leadership with some additional components of leadership. So not just leading your team, but also leading yourself, as well as leading the enterprise, the business. And so we've distilled some questions that we've received from professionals like yourselves and from some of our contemporaries here in the industry. And so I will pose these questions to my colleague and friend, I have to say. I will pose these questions to Bernice, and we'll talk about and share some insights that we've gathered from working with clients and experience in this executive coaching world. And so we'll also talk about how coaching contributes to organizational growth as well. So Bernice, are you ready?
I am ready. It's always great to have this conversation. And as Jay said, if anyone has questions, comments, feel free to pop it in and we'll address it.
Awesome. Thank you, Bernice. And I see that our audience in the chat, they're ready as well. So I will start with the first question that we have here, Bernice, and it says, what is the most effective way to lead? So can you talk about the three components of leadership?
Sure. You know, when we talk about leading, most of us default to that we're leading a team of people. We need to build trust. We need to build relationship, managing performance and all of that. So that's one of the components of leadership, which is leading your teams. Most people don't consider that in leadership, there's two other components that are so crucial. One is leading yourself, and the other is leading the enterprise. So I'll share a little bit about what that means, right? So leading yourself involves self-management, regulating your emotions, being self-aware, knowing when you're reactive, and knowing when you're not at your best. And when you are fully aware of that and you practice self-care and you manage your time and energy, then you're able to handle a lot of pressures from life much more effectively. And then you are able to consistently build your leadership brand in a way that you want to be perceived and in a way that is most empowering to you. So that other aspect of leadership, of leading yourself, is one of the places I always start with when I work with clients. So before I go further into the leading,
Yeah.
do you want to delve more into this?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to recap, I love what you said in terms of those three components. It's leading yourself, it's leading your team, and then leading the enterprise. And you've already started to, talk a little bit about, what leading yourself, what that means. In just a moment, we had a follow-up question around the difference between leading yourself and leading an enterprise and leading others. And I want us to get into that in just a moment, but I did want to kind of double click, as they say, on you talked about your own leadership brand. Can you tell us more about what do you mean when you say our leadership brand?
It's like when you think of Nike,
Yeah.
you think of some very specific things, right?
Yeah.
Athletes and just
Mhm.
do it. There's verve and power. So it's the
Mhm.
same thing.
Yeah.
Every person is a brand in itself. And if we don't take the care to create our own brand, other people create it for us. It's
That's good.
always the perception, the narrative, and you want to take control
Yeah, yeah, I
what
love that.
people think of you rather than have it be a default to, oh, that's what people made up.
Yeah, I like that. It reminds me of something that we, often work with clients around, their leadership presence. That's a part of their brand. It's one thing
Yes.
when we have a desire to show up one way. However, it's when you ask for that feedback, it's like, is that resonating? Do people really see me in the light, that I want them to see me? So I like the idea of being intentional about that as,
And
setting the
Jay,
foundation.
yeah, what you said is so crucial, the getting feedback from
Hmm.
others, because oftentimes we have our intentions.
Hmm.
And then our actions, sometimes our actions may not be perceived as aligned with our intention. So we
Yeah.
intended X and somebody interprets it as Y, right?
Hmm.
And so when you get feedback, you become very, very aware of, were my behaviors received
Yeah.
the way I intended it? And if it is, good. If it's not, then that's where you could course correct and start aligning your
Yeah.
intentions with your actions.
Yeah, I love that. And mentioning it as the first component that that we wanted to mention and address, I think is, setting the foundation, and it undergirds, the other two components of leading, your team and leading your enterprise. So with
Mhm.
that, the next question that we had on the list from some of the folks that chimed in is, what is the difference between leading an enterprise and leading others?
Yes. So leading others is typically in the context of a team. So
Mm-hmm.
if you are a manager, a director, VP of an organization, you typically would have teams of people underneath you, and then you're working with your colleagues, with your peers. So when you are leading others, most of the focus is around relationship building, right? Building trust, being authentic, having that social acumen of empathy, knowing how to manage conflicts, when one arises. And if you have people reporting to, it's managing their performance, holding them accountable, coaching them, motivating, inspiring, and ensuring that the team is working cohesively. So
Mm-hmm.
that's managing others. On the most high side of leading is leading an enterprise. Imagine if you're the CEO of an organization or you're on the C-suite, beyond leading yourself and beyond leading other people and your team, it's important to think from an enterprise perspective, which is, what's the vision for the
Mm-hmm.
organization? What are the strategies that will
Mm-hmm.
allow us to get there? How do we help people transition through the changes that they'll have to navigate? And how do I shape the culture that gives people a sense of place and belonging?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so oftentimes in companies, people think, oh, that's the CEO's job, or that's the C-suite's job. But in fact, if every one of us starts thinking in terms of the enterprise level, not just in our job scope level, it allows us to step up in our leadership and connect the dots, so that
Mm-hmm.
we're not minding just our own little spot, but you're seeing how is what I'm doing connected to the bigger picture. And that's what creates commitment and inspiration. And when you see that what you do every day is connected to a larger good.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. You mentioned that, some of those key components of leading the enterprise is visioning. You talked about strategic leadership, the big picture. You talked about driving change and culture shaping, so inclusivity and safeness, within that enterprise. It reminds me of a scenario where there are times where clients that that we've both worked with, but that I've worked with, and they're moving into this leadership role. And, of course, a lot of the focus is usually on, I need to gain followership. I need to be able to get the influence that I need in order to lead my teams, get their trust, build that rapport. But it's interesting how it's the enterprise part that we don't hear about as much. And so I want to ask you if there are any scenarios that come to mind where maybe you've been working with a client before, and what are some of the common challenges that you hear that folks have around leading the enterprise part of leadership?
Yeah, this one is really close to my heart
Yeah.
because I personally experienced a massive shift in an organization and culture when I joined Pepsi in 2007, PepsiCo.
Hmm.
And many of you, I'm sure, have heard of Indra Nooyi. She stepped up as the CEO of PepsiCo in
Hmm.
2006, just a year before I joined. And what she observed is that a lot of Fortune 500 companies focus a lot on shareholder value, right?
Hmm.
Most of our organization is focused on how are we creating wealth? How are we driving shares? How are we driving volume? How are we driving profitability? And she pointed out that for the company to have long-term success, we need to not only create shareholder value, we want to create value for all stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
And so she created this whole theme around performance with purpose.
Mm.
And she anchored all the strategic changes that were going to happen in the organization in the next 12 years around that theme. And the idea there is that if we don't get ahead of the health trends and sustainability demands, we'll lose our customers, we'll lose our people, and we'll lose our competitive advantage. Because at the time, in 2006, most of Pepsi's portfolio was around soda, chips, a lot of snacks that are not necessarily healthy. And then we were all shifting into this trend. And her view was we need to shift and we need to create purpose so that people feel pride in their jobs. They're not earning just a paycheck. They see why we're doing this. They see their unique contribution to it, and they feel inspired to do their best. And it really created a massive momentum within the organization, and the growth in the sales and profits was plus 80%. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
During the time that Indra was CEO of PepsiCo.
Nice, nice. I saw someone write in the chat. Leslie said, I see this a lot in my organization. Leaders who are great with their teams, but not necessarily adept at the organizational leadership. So it's a poignant piece, and I think that it's not as highlighted as some of the other areas of leadership. And that's a great example too, within what you just shared, of how you can find your, unique purpose within that bigger picture, and attach, your passion or your purpose to the bigger purpose. And I think that that really drives the way that people show up in their roles, and how they, show up, just how they show up in leadership, and how they feel about the organization in itself. Lisa says, Bernice, great example of the enterprise piece, that it's not only shareholders, but all stakeholders. So that's a really good point. Thank you. I see that, you talked about working with this particular client. And you kind of gave us, kind of like a peek into what some of that coaching probably looked like, and some of the things that you guys talked about in order to connect that purpose. But I want to ask you, and it's a question that we've received, and it says, how does effective coaching directly contribute to organizational growth and bottom line results? Can
Yeah.
you share some things about that?
Yes. And that's always the first question that
Yeah.
clients ask, because it's like, I'm investing time
Yeah.
and money with you. How will it be different at the end of this time? And how will it impact ROI? So
Right.
I always explain that coaching is it's a method that allows the coachee to see themselves as an observer, not the person in the situation. Because
Hmm.
all of us leaders in organizations tend to deal with a lot of things coming at us. And as human beings, we have thoughts, we have feelings, and we get reactive to the situation, right? And when you are in a coaching relationship, you bring a lot of these challenges to the coaching conversation. And through the conversation, you can rise above your own personal reactions, your own personal feelings, and you can almost see yourself as an observer of you. And you could
Mm-hmm.
see, oh, this is what happened. And here was my interpretation of it, which made me have all these reactions. And if I were an objective observer looking at this, what would I do differently?
Yeah.
So, a really great analogy is if you're walking in the woods, all you could see is what's directly around you and in front of you. And you can't see the big picture,
Yeah.
right? So working with a coach is like having the ability to zoom out further, so you could rise above the canopy and see the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
It also allows you to zoom in, to look really closely at a specific flower on the floor, so that you could see, oh, what are the details around this situation? And you could really get what are the specifics that you may have missed before. And you can also have an X-ray vision,
Mm-hmm.
yourself to look at what were my internal motivations
Yeah.
and what caused me to have these kinds of reactions. And if I were truly committed to these causes and to these relationships, what would I do differently? So it really gives you the space to look, to zoom out, zoom in, and look around the corners.
Mm-hmm.
See, how do I navigate situations in a way that's empowering?
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that it's a Tammy says I love that analogy and it does resonate, because it what you're sharing is that it gives, the person that's being coached an opportunity to look at themselves both externally and internally is what you just shared. And it reminds me of one of the things that I personally appreciate about having an executive coach that comes in that's maybe outside of the organization. Of course, we gather feedback from folks that they work with, who can give some insight, with what it's like to work with that person. But I say when you move into that internal piece where now you've gotten this feedback and now you are matching it up next to your own intentions or, learning those behaviors for why we respond and react the way that we respond and react, it's also very helpful to have that person from the outside of the organization to kind of work that through with. There's something to be said about maybe some of the self-consciousness that comes with coaching and some of the
Yes.
transparency and the vulnerability that it requires to really take a look at yourself and not feel as if, oh, I don't know if this is gonna, I don't want to plant a bad seed within my organization or how others see me. Is there something that you can add to, the value of having, a coach come in that's not a part of the organization, the same organization?
Yes, the two words are safe space.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
oftentimes, we work with senior leaders and they really don't have that space
Yeah.
to share about what's going on
Yeah.
in their minds, and they can't share up because it's risky, right? It's
Yeah. Yeah.
could be career limiting if you say
Right.
the wrong thing, and they certainly can't share down
Yeah.
because they have to be the strong lead for the
Hmm.
people. And oftentimes we get in our heads,
Yeah.
right? And the more we get in our heads about the situation, the less we can see the way forward.
Yeah.
And so having that safe space for someone to come and just say, here's what's going on, the good and the bad and the ugly, let's process and let's untangle all there is and let's connect me with my commitments
Hmm.
so that I'm taking actions in line with my commitment of what's good for the organization rather than stay in my reactions and
Hmm.
its value. And there are a lot of companies who have internal coaches as well. And one of the things that I've heard a lot from people who've gone through that experience is it's great if
Hmm.
you are wanting to work on skills
Yeah.
like communication or managing conflict or presentation. Those are fantastic uh, resources to address deepening skills.
Hmm.
But when it comes to truly addressing very deep concerns that are complex and issues that involve looking very far out, issues that involve confidentiality or
Hmm.
relationships at a very high stakes level,
Hmm.
people do not feel safe to
Yeah.
go to the internal resources. And the external resources are the ones that have really created the path
Yeah.
to transparency and the path to workability, where people feel like this is the one that has made a massive difference as a safe space and a sounding board.
Hmm.
Share what truly is people are working on deeply.
Yeah, I like that. And it kind of goes into this next question that we had that I wanted to ask you. The question is, what do you think stands in the way of people leading the enterprise? And I do think you kind of touched on that a little bit with some of the I guess you could say the risk or the fragility around, wanting to seem competent and deserving of the position or of leadership that you're in. But what are some of the things that you would say get in the way of people leading the enterprise?
I think the first thing is mindset. We're often trained to stay in our lanes,
Yeah.
right? And we
Hmm.
think that, oh, if I'm responsible for marketing, this is what I look at.
Right.
We rarely try to look outside of our immediate remit because we feel like our job is to stay X, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
The other piece, aside from mindset, is perspective. Lacking the perspective of understanding how having a broad view of the enterprise goals and how our teams and our role connect directly with the enterprise role makes us not concerned or not interested
Hmm.
with the
Hmm.
enterprise objectives. And so when we shift our mindset that my role is to not just do my job, my role is to understand how everything connects and to help my people truly understand the value of interconnectivity and the richness of having multiple points of view address an issue, as well as have the perspective that if everyone were to take this mindset, then we will all naturally reach out
Yeah.
and want to join forces rather than stay in silos, which is, to me, the biggest issues in organizations. The bigger they are, the more complex, and they build all
Hmm.
these silos, and everybody, one party doesn't know what the other party's doing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's so good. You talked about both mindset and perspective. So for those of you who are taking copious notes, that's something I would certainly hold on to, and great examples. We've talked a bit about how to help professionals and leaders change that mindset and get a different perspective, which I think is a part of the coaching process. But speaking of the coaching process, we have a question here that says, what does a typical executive coaching engagement look like?
Hmm. So typically it's a 6-month engagement to start. And I always like to start by gaining a very deep insight into the person. So I interview them about their whole life story.
Hmm.
And in that, people find, oh, I never thought about why I am the way I am. It's because of these early experiences. Because for the most part, as human beings, though our actions, our decisions are automatic, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
We're thinking deeply about why we decide certain things. And a lot of these decisions are rooted on our early life experiences that help us either survive or make it in life.
Yeah.
So finding a really deep introspective conversation so that the the client sees themselves and sees, oh wow, these are the things that have helped me either succeed or put me in a hole is
Hmm.
was a really great start.
Yeah.
Then once you have that self-awareness, then I always make sure they have good other awareness,
Hmm.
and that's where we interview people who are their stakeholders so that they understand, oh, if I want to work really well with these people, how are my current behaviors landing on them? Is it working or am I not so effective?
Yeah.
And the people tend to, uh, you know, in life, we rarely want to tell someone that, you know, what you're doing doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so these feedback are a gold mine because you get unfiltered messaging. You'll feel like you're a fly on the wall when people are talking about you behind your back.
Exactly.
And you really get hit between the eyes and
Right.
yourself, wow, people admire me for this. I never even thought about that. Or wow, this thing uh, that I did, it landed people
Yeah.
all wrong. Then you have a
Hmm.
chance to address it, right? So that's the self-awareness, other awareness. Then the third thing is we often include assessments like psychometrics assessments, like
Hmm.
Hogan, Korn Ferry, and those are very science-based uh, tests that give you an X-ray vision into how's the inner wiring of a person.
Hmm.
So then what we do is take all these three, the self-awareness, other awareness, and assessments, and create a development plan
Yeah.
that says, if these are my goals, what are the strengths I want to consciously leverage? And what are the gaps that I learned about myself that I want to fill in order to best meet those goals? And then we
Hmm.
coach against that.
Nice, nice. Thank you. I see there another question came into the chat earlier and it said, can you share some examples of a mindset or perspective shift in action that help to drive organizational growth?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So oftentimes the mindset is that I'm taking care of myself and my team. Right?
Yeah.
We see ourselves in a bubble.
Hmm.
And when we think of our role as to mind our own business,
Yes.
then
Literally. Yes.
all our actions are like heads down, like an
Yeah.
ostrich, right? Very focused into this is just my space. And
Hmm.
our boundaries are very tight,
Hmm.
and we have much limited ability to influence and much limited interest
Yeah.
in knowing what's going on around us.
Right.
So if you make a shift and say, the way that I can make the biggest difference is when I can connect what I do with what the organization's goals are.
Hmm. Hmm.
And you create the mindset of uh, being not just aware, but
Yeah.
uh, being keenly committed to the big picture and how everything fits and moves together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then instantly your actions will be different, right?
Yeah.
You'll raise your head out from the hole,
Yeah.
start looking at, if my team did these, how would it affect other teams? How does that further our collective goal
Yeah.
versus what's good for me or what's good for them? And
Hmm.
when everybody's looking more broadly and looking at how do we all win together rather than
Hmm.
I win and you lose, then it creates a very strong connectivity and a very strong sense of purpose.
Hmm. Yeah, nice. That's really good. It reminds me of, even some of my own experiences where, I in the space that I sit in this industry, my role for a lot of you who are watching and listening, in addition to coaching and facilitating, it has a lot to do with interacting with our affiliates, the people who are actually delivering some of that coaching and some of that the facilitating and even some of the designing of some of those programs and offerings. And, in addition to the strategy behind that and the logistics, there are tasks that we have to get done. We'll never escape that. But I've thought about, how can I show up in a way that I'm able to bring my genuine self to a role, and how can I show up in a way where I can connect the things that are important to me as a person. And for me, and as an example, it's connecting with others and providing what you mentioned earlier, that safe space, showing up, with empathy, ready to listen, be open-minded and connected with others. I don't have to just reserve that for outside of, work or for friends or close loved ones, but finding a way to weave that into your role and your capacity, within an organization and how it can serve the overall, enterprise, I think is a gold mine. So I would encourage those of you who are listening to find what that is for you. I see that we have one another question here that I want to read. It says, when someone is moving into a leadership position, how do you reframe their actions or thinking pattern to be more enterprise driven?
Mm.
There's a second part to this. It says, are there any frameworks they can use or actions they can take?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question.
Mhm.
So the first thing is recognizing that uh, the role of
Mhm.
leaders is not just vertical, right? It's like oftentimes people are thinking about their work and their function as this is my space. And when people understand that the more the more they can, the more they are interconnecting the dots, the more they can be effective in influencing.
Mhm.
So recognizing that the role of a leader is not just to get the job done, which is oftentimes what people think,
Right.
it's about effective influencing. And if you see that your role is about influencing, you naturally will think about, well, who am I wanting to influence? And how do I make sure I know their concerns well enough for me to be able to influence them?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it all starts with the role that you see yourself playing. If you think your role is just to deliver the goods
Yeah.
and just do the job, that's a narrow scope, which will make you be an effective, maybe effective business driver,
Mhm.
but not an effective leader necessarily, and certainly not an enterprise leader. And so if you think about it as what world leaders do, what corporate leaders do, that their role is about influencing. It's about helping, being able to change minds, being
Mhm.
able to take people from entrenched positions out of their uh, narrow views and widen other people's views just a little bit,
Yeah.
then you naturally would start looking up and out and seeing broader.
Yeah, yeah, I like that a lot. Um, something that resonates with me is you talked about it's not just about getting the job done, but also thinking about your influence within that organization in order to, take your leadership to the next level. There's a question here that I did want to raise, and I know we're getting close to time here. It came from Rich. Rich says, what are some of the best ways you can ask for a seat at the table when you're in a highly visible role, leadership, and you want to move up in the organization?
Mm, yeah. The key thing is always bring value,
Yeah.
right? Because when you offer something of value to people and your focus is on how can I help? How can
Hmm.
I move things forward? How can I bring my unique gift so that it's a contribution to
Hmm.
others? People experience you as making a difference and
Hmm.
therefore would invite you to a seat at the table.
Hmm.
And when you start first by contributing rather than asking for permission,
Hmm.
asking for an official seat at the table, uh, you want to play the part first.
Yeah.
Right? And when you play the part, you eventually become that part.
Hmm. Hmm.
So always ask yourself, how can I help? How can I deliver value?
Hmm. I like that. That's a really good answer. How can I help? How can I deliver value? You talked about what's my unique contribution, my unique gift. And I love that concept of first contributing. So being that role that you want to go after, already being that before you ask for it. So I think that's a great segue, and a great segue into closing, I should say, but and also a great way to address moving up within an organization, especially in leadership. So that's awesome. We are at time. We are getting pretty close here to time. I see some people um, from the chat that are saying thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today, and saying how this is really helpful. I saw a note earlier that talked about being able to use what you just said in terms of that seat at the table, how they're going to apply that and use that in the near future. So awesome. Anything else that you wanted to add here, Bernice, before we close out?
No, I think the key thing is to elevate
Yeah.
everyone, right? And as people who are keepers of the organization's culture, as well as the learning agility, developing the learning agility, I always encourage the HR teams to look at how do we keep moving people just one
Yeah.
step higher consistently. And when everybody takes that step to elevate, they bring everybody up along with them. It's like a rising tide
Yeah.
floats all boats.
Nice, nice. Thank you, Bernice. And thank you, everyone who joined our session today. I'll turn over to you, Liz, here in just a second to give your closing remarks. But we just want to say thank you so much for, sitting in with us, listening in, and being a part of this conversation. Please reach out to us, through the various ways to reach out in terms of our email or LinkedIn. We're happy to connect with you, and we're always sharing insights from our experience and with our firm. So just thank you all for being with us. Over to you, Liz.
Yes, love the positive spirit, and I'm loving the chats of like enjoying this fireside conversation. I know for myself, who produces a lot of these, PowerPoint fatigue is a real thing. So this was a lovely conversation, and I appreciate y'all so much.
Thank you so much, Liz. It's a pleasure.
Of course, back at you. But yes, as he plugged, I do have some things I would like to share for everyone else who is still with us. So again, thank you for all of our dynamic speakers and sponsors. We had ELB Learning, Biz Library, Ariel Group, Leadership Progress Cycle, and Blue Point Leadership. We had such great sessions today, and I hope you took some stuff out, if not a lot. I saw a couple people say 3 to 5 pages of notes, which I love to hear. Additionally, all of our sessions are pre-qualified for a credit hour by SHRM, HRCI, ISPI, and CPTM. Send an email to myself or anyone else on the TI team, and we will get you those codes today, if not maybe tomorrow. I would also love to meet you all here in person in Raleigh, North Carolina for a 2025 Training Industry Conference and Expo. TICE is where learning leaders like you gather to forge new professional connections. You learn from each other and address your most pressing learning challenges so you can re-energize your learning initiatives in June this year. So you can learn more at TICE2025.com. Additionally, you can gain the expertise to build effective leadership development programs that drive organizational success, earn your leading leadership development certificate to build developing better leaders and achieve greater impact. Oh, the applause. Stop it, guys. This is so sweet. I know it's not me. It was our amazing speakers. But one last reminder that a survey will pop open in another tab in your browser. And we would greatly appreciate your feedback on all things speakers, Zoom platforms, myself, anything. We appreciate it. But thank you all for joining us here today. Until next time, I am Liz. I hope you have a great day, a great week, and I hope to see you all next time. Bye, everybody.